Is the Catholic Church opposed to happiness? Some people think so. What I'd like to do, though, is first focus on what is happiness. In the history of philosophy, various philosophers have defined happiness in different ways, and I'd like to draw today on the work of a Jesuit named Robert Spitzer. He has a great book called Healing the Culture that talks about the levels of happiness, 4 different levels of happiness. So let's start off with level 1 happiness. What is level 1 happiness? Well, Spitzer defines it as the kind of happiness we share in common with dogs and cats. It's the kind of happiness we enjoy if we have a good meal, or we drink wine, or we have sex. All those are level 1 happiness. They're the happiness of bodily pleasure. And as human beings, of course, we enjoy level 1 happiness. Everyone who's hungry likes to eat food. And so there's certain advantages that everyone can recognize in level 1 happiness. For one thing is that it's fairly easy to obtain. Hopefully, at least, you have enough food to eat, enough water to drink. A second thing is that it arrives very quickly. I mean, if you're hungry and you eat food right away, you feel the pleasure. So it has the advantage also of it can be quite overwhelming, right? If someone drinks a lot of alcohol, they really feel the effects. But a balanced analysis of level 1 happiness includes not just the good, but also the challenges of level 1 happiness. So what would be some of the drawbacks of level 1? Well, bodily pleasure, as I mentioned, comes on really quickly, but it also leaves really quickly, right? Think of the last time you were hungry and ate a hamburger or something, right? It was great, it smelled great, tasted great, but right away, once it's in your stomach, the pleasure of it is kind of over, right? You're not able to enjoy it any longer. Another drawback to level 1 happiness, at least some forms of level 1 happiness, is the drawback of getting used to it. Right? Plato talked about this as the leaky jar syndrome. So if we have a jar and we think of happiness as being filled up, the more we, say, drink alcohol, the more we develop a tolerance and a resistance to alcohol. So to get the same level of intoxication, we have to have more and more and more. But of course, the more we drink, the more our body gets used to it, and the higher dose of alcohol we need to get the very same level of happiness and satisfaction. So it seems like a self-defeating sort of goal to seek level 1 happiness, because the more we get, the more we need, and the less we'll be satisfied with what we had. Level 1 happiness also has a big drawback, at least some forms, in terms of addiction. So we all know people who have struggled with drug abuse or alcohol abuse, and we all know how their lives can really fall apart. It can be a complete disaster for them, for their family, for all those who care about them. And so level 1 happiness has this drawback of being something that can lead to addictions. And that seems like a very serious drawback to an exclusive dedication to level 1 happiness. Well, what else can we say about level 1 happiness? Is there any other drawbacks to it? Well, since we're human beings, yes, of course we want to have level 1 happiness, but we all want more. And that's why almost everybody graduates from an exclusive dedication to level 1 happiness. Almost everyone graduates to level 2 happiness. And what's that? Well, level 2 happiness is the happiness that we get from being better than others in some competition. So maybe you play sports, and that would be the happiness you'd get from, winning the race. Or maybe at work, the kind of happiness you'd get from getting a big raise at work. If you're in the movies, it'd be the happiness of having your movie be #1 at the box office. But whatever domain we're in, the basic idea of level 2 happiness is that we compare ourselves to others, and then we see, are we doing better or worse than them? If we're doing better, then we're happy. If we're doing worse, well, then we're sad. Now, level 2 happiness does have some advantages over level 1. I mean, for one thing, it's not addicting, right? You're not going to have a chemical addiction or an alcohol problem with level 2 happiness. Maybe psychologically you might have some addiction, but no physical addiction is there for level 2. Secondly, it has the advantage that it's something celebrated by society, right? If you're very famous, or you make a lot of money, or you've got a lot of power, all those things are going to be recognized by society, and you're going to be celebrated. Whereas level 1, we don't give out awards for drinking the most beer or something. So it has those advantages. And almost everybody graduates from a pure level 1 point of view to at least a level 2 point of view. And why do I say almost everyone and not everyone? Well, there's some human beings that are really just at level 1. So think about a newborn baby, right? A newborn baby couldn't care less about being popular or rich or famous or anything like that. All the baby cares about is getting fed, being warm, being snuggled, that's it. So those human beings just care about level 1. And the other group of human beings that only care about level 1 would be hardcore addicts, right? Some people, hardcore drug addicts, that's all they care about is their pure level 1. But for everybody else, they graduate to level 2. And level 2 is better in lots of ways. But Spitzer points out that as good as level 2 is, it has also its crisis. It has its drawback. So what would be the crisis of level 2 happiness? Well, one of them he calls upping the stakes. So let me explain that. If you achieve a certain level of success, what happens is you get used to it. And pretty soon you want higher levels of success. So maybe think back to, maybe you went off to college and you got into your college of your choice. And you thought, oh, this is great. I'm in my college I wanted to go to. I'm so happy. I'm so, have so much level 2 happiness. But once you get to there, right, you get used to it, right? And that's true of anything, right? If you were into level 2 in terms of power, you might be overjoyed when you first became mayor of Los Angeles, and then maybe even more overjoyed years later when you became governor of California. And let's say you're elected president. Well, you would love that. But, after a while, you get used to it, even if you were president, right? I'm sure the president of the United States, the third year into the job doesn't get out of bed and say, oh my gosh, you're amazing, I'm president, this is so great. No, they're totally used to it. So whatever level of success we get to, we always desire a higher level. It doesn't satisfy us in a lasting way. Take, for example, the case of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's album Thriller was the best-selling album of all time. In fact, Thriller sold so many albums, if you added up the second and third best-selling album, AC/DC's Back in Black and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, you put those together, that's still not as many copies sold as Thriller. So Michael Jackson was number 1 by a mile. Well, before he died, Michael Jackson gave an interview, and he said in the interview, after Thriller, I spent the rest of my life, the rest of my career trying to outdo Thriller. In other words, even the person who was in fact number 1 wasn't satisfied, right? He wanted more. And that's true of all of us, right? Think about money, right? I'm sure everybody would love to have extra money. I know I would. I've got a bunch of kids. It'd be great. But they've done surveys of money, and when they ask people, well, how much more money would you need to be comfortable? Well, basically what people say is, well, if I just had 10 or 15% more, right? And that's true of people when they make, $30,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $300,000 a year. They all say the same thing. If I just made 20 or 30% more, well, then I'd be comfortable, right? The fact is, no matter how much money we make, we get used to that level, and then we want more. Now, I should be clear. Having more money definitely will make you more happy if you are starving. If you don't have 3 meals a day, if you don't have warm clothes, you have nowhere to sleep, well, getting those basic necessities definitely is going to make you a lot more happy. But what the researchers found is that after you've gotten those basic necessities, more money really is irrelevant to happiness. There's a great chart of the United States, and it shows the average income in the United States over the last 50 or 60 years going higher and higher and higher. So in other words, if you look at families 50, 60 years ago, they'd be in a relatively small house, they'd have only 1 car, they'd have maybe 1 black and white TV. And then the typical family today lives in a bigger house, has not just 1 car, but multiple cars, doesn't have 1 black and white TV, everyone has a cell phone. So we have a lot more stuff today, and we have a lot more money today on average than we did 50 or 60 years ago. But when you look at the percentage of people who say they're very happy, that number is flatlined. It's no different than it was 50, 60 years ago. So the experience of the United States suggests very strongly that once you're out of dire poverty, getting more and more and more and more money is really irrelevant to happiness. It just doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So if we look at level 2 happiness, we can see how it is something that is better than level 1 in some ways, but nevertheless is something that's not really going to satisfy us, even if we get lots of it. Now, if you're in a competition for power, money, fame, whatever, you could win. We talked about that already, but you could also lose. So if you lose at the level 2 happiness game, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to be horrible, right? If you think life is all about making money and you don't make money, you're going to be miserable. If you think life is all about being popular and you're not popular, you're going to think you're worthless. So level 2, if you're a loser, turns into disaster. Now, I think we have the very strongest evidence possible that level 1 happiness and level 2 happiness don't, in fact, deliver on lasting satisfaction for human beings. And the reason I say that is the example of many, many celebrities. So I'm talking to you from Los Angeles, and in Los Angeles, lots of celebrities around here. And all the time we see in the media how these people who have maximum level 1 happiness and maximum level 2 happiness nevertheless are really not happy. They're miserable and sometimes even kill themselves, right? They have all the sex and all the booze and all the drugs they can take, and they've got lots of money, lots of fame, lots of power. So they've got lots of this, both of these things, and yet some of these people are absolutely miserable and even kill themselves. So if level 1 happiness and level 2 happiness, even in mega doses, even in celebrity doses, don't work to deliver us real happiness, what will work? Well, Spitzer points us to level 3 happiness. And what's that? Well, level 3 happiness he defines as loving and serving other human beings. So it's the kind of happiness you get from really helping out your friend and making your friend's life better. It's the kind of happiness that a mother or father would get from helping their child and enhancing the child's life. The kind of happiness a teacher would get from teaching students, or a good doctor would get from helping patients get better. So it's the kind of happiness that people get from helping other people, whether in their work or in their leisure. It's level 3 happiness. And level 3 happiness has lots of advantages over level 2 and level 1. One of the things that's advantageous of level 3 is it doesn't worry so much about social comparison. The fact is we all lose on the social comparison game, at least in some respects. But level 3 is not about that. Level 3 is not about always trying to be better than the person next door. Level 3 is rather about trying to be your best self and trying to help others. And the good news is, of course, since there's lots of people in the world, there's almost always opportunities to help others. If we're seeking level 2 happiness, not everyone can get the job, not everyone can be famous, not everyone can be rich. But if we're seeking level 3, everyone can love other people, help other people, serve other people. In fact, there's many opportunities for level 3 as there are people in the world to help. And there's lots and lots of people in the world that need help. And it starts right next door. Sometimes my students think, well, if I want level 3, that means I need to go somewhere else or I need to do special volunteer hours. And that's great. It's great to go somewhere else and do special volunteer hours. But level 3 happiness is about the kind of service that you can give right where you are, in your own family, in your own community, with your next door neighbor or the person across the street. It's kind of happiness you can get right where you are.
You have heard the traditional Veni, Creator Spiritus, Come, Creator Spirit song. We do not know the author of this song. It is an invocation to the Holy Spirit, and it is sung in the Catholic Church during the liturgical celebrations of the Feast of the Pentecost. It is also sung during the ordinations of priests and bishops and at some solemn events. It is such a heavenly feeling and experience when we listen to it being sung in Gregorian chant. Father Mike Manning has written a booklet to understand this great song of praise. He takes the English translation of the song and explains it in detail, but in plain language. It will surely help you understand and pray with this song in praise of the Holy Spirit. We want you to have a copy of this booklet.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also order it through our website. Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten our minds and hearts.
There was a famous study done at the University of Pennsylvania, and the professor asked the students, one group of students, go do something fun, go do something pleasurable, like go to the movies, go eat some ice cream. And then he said to another group of students, I want you to do some service. I want you to be a volunteer. And the students went out and some got ice cream and went to the movies, and some did service and became volunteers. And then they came back, and it turned out both of them enjoyed what they did, right? The people that got ice cream and went to the movies, and the people who served. But the people who served others, the people who were volunteers, people that did acts of love, their happiness level lasted much longer. Again, unlike eating an ice cream cone, which is nice for the moment and then gone, the happiness of love and the happiness of service is a lasting kind of happiness. So level 3 happiness has lots of advantages. One of the key advantages is level 3 happiness is under your control. You can make yourself, give yourself happiness through love and service of others. All the other kinds of happiness that we've talked about so far are really not in your control, right? You can't really make yourself famous. You can try. Lots of people in Hollywood try to become famous and they fail. You can't really make yourself be powerful. Again, you can try. You can run for office, but you might lose. You can't really make yourself rich. You can try, but you might pick the wrong stocks or whatever. But level 3 is the kind of happiness that you do have control over, right? I can choose to be a good husband or not. I can choose to try to be a good father or not, try to be a good friend or not. That's the kind of happiness that we really do have some control over. And in fact, there's a famous study at Harvard University called the Grant Study. And in the Grant Study, they looked at undergraduates starting about 19 or 20, and they studied them their whole lives. So the study went on for years and years. And at the end of the study, the lead researcher was asked, well, what did you learn in studying all these people for all these years? What really makes a difference for life? And the researcher said that after all this millions of dollars spent and all the hours and all the data gathered, he said, happiness is love, full stop. That if we want a good life, we need to have love. We need to love other people in our lives. Not necessarily get married. You can have a great life and your life can be full of love and you're not married. But we need loving relationships, friendships, people we serve, people that we are contributing to their lives. We need that very much. So level 3 happiness. Even that, Spitzer says, is not ideal. Why? Well, because Spitzer says, in addition to the desires we have for level 1, level 2, and level 3, we also have level 4 desires. He calls these transcendent desires. The idea here is something like this, that we desire to know the truth. And if you doubt me, think what happens when you can't find your cell phone, or when the electricity is out and you can't watch TV or listen to the radio, right? We want to know. And when we're thwarted in this desire to know, because our cell phone's lost or the electricity is out, we feel very frustrated. But the fact is, even though we have this drive to know the truth, here on earth, all the truths that we know are very partial. We can't know the fullness of truth, the perfection of truth. And we also want goodness. But here below, all the goods that we enjoy are themselves imperfect and fragile and fleeting. So we can't really find a good that satisfies our will perfectly. And we want perfect love. But even the most beautiful love here on earth is going to end. Think about a husband and wife, been married 50 years, love each other very much. Well, there's going to come a time when they have their last kiss, and one or both of them dies. So we want perfect truth, we want perfect goodness, we want perfect love, but there's nothing here below that can perfectly satisfy us in terms of these things. So Spitzer says we want a higher love, a higher happiness, level 4 happiness. And level 4 happiness is love of God, love of perfect truth, perfect goodness, and perfect love. Now, it's great when all these levels of happiness can work together, and they can sometimes. Right? Think of maybe a student gets up in the morning and has a good breakfast, so they get their level 1 and they're not hungry. They go to school because they want to be a really good student, get good grades. So they're going for level 2, being a good student, getting good grades. And they're doing that because, say, they want to go to medical school, and they want to go to medical school because they want to be a great doctor and really help patients. Okay, that's level 3. And then they want to help patients because they view every single person as being made in God's image And so they view every single person, even sick people, as having innate human dignity. All right, level 4. So you can have all these levels of happiness working together. But here below, sometimes we have to choose, right? Either level 1 or level 2. Either I have my level 1, I stay in bed, it's nice and cozy, or I get out of bed and go to work and get more money, get my level 2. Sometimes we have to choose between level 2 and level 3, right? I'm going to be at work and I'm going to get ahead by lying about, rivals at work and cause them to get fired so then I get a raise. So I could get more level 2, but then that would be at the expense of level 3, that is loving and serving and being fair to others. So sometimes we have to choose between the levels. Fortunately, level 3 and level 4 always go together in the sense of if I really love God, if I really have level 4, well, then I'm going to love the image of God that I find in other people. So those go together. But what should we do when we have to choose? Well, Spitzer thinks that we should choose the higher levels of happiness in cases where they conflict with the lower levels of happiness. So a great example of this would be, say, the case of drunk driving. Right? In drunk driving, what happens? Someone chooses their level 1 happiness, enjoying alcohol, in such a way that it undermines and gets in the way of level 3 and level 4 happiness, serving and helping others by being a safe driver on the road. So let's circle back. What does all this have to do with the church? Well, the church wants us to have real happiness, deep happiness, true happiness. And so the church proposes to us, echoing the message of Jesus, 2 fundamental commandments. That we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, all our strength, and we should love our neighbor as ourselves. To put it in other terms, the church proposes to us level 4 happiness and level 3 happiness. And level 2 and level 1 is fine so long as they don't get in the way of those. But think about what the church teaches about various things. There are all ways of trying to enhance our happiness, right? For instance, the church tells us not to murder innocent people. Well, that's another way of saying don't let your level 1 and level 2 get in the way of your level 3 and level 4. In other words, if I kill someone to steal their stuff, what's happening is I'm letting my level 1 and level 2 desires trump my level 3 and level 4 desires. Or think about the sin of greed, right? What is greed? Greed might be defined as a disordered love of money. The fact is we all need money. Right? If you're going to eat food, you need to, you have a stomach, you need to have some money to get your food. So there's nothing wrong with money. But what could go wrong is a disordered love of money. So let's say I love money so much that I neglect my wife and I neglect my kids in my efforts to make more money. Right? So I'm off working all day long and traveling nonstop. And my wife's like, hey, we've got our anniversary coming up. No, honey, I got to stay late at the office and work hard. Kids are like, hey, Dad, can you help me with piano? No, got to work. Sorry, no time for that. If I dedicate myself to money as if money's God, if I give myself fully and totally to making money, well, that would be another way of saying that I'm a greedy person. I had a disordered love of money. But if I have a disordered love of money, what happens? If I treat gold as if it's a god, what happens? Well, what happens is I don't love my wife the way I should, because I put money ahead of her. I don't love my kids the way I should. I put money ahead of them. I don't love God the way I should, right? So everything gets out of whack. Everything gets out of order. So a condemnation of greed, you might say, is a celebration of the goodness of love, the priority of love of God and love of neighbor. Now the same thing's true of all the church's teachings. All the church's teachings are reflections of encouragements to love God with our whole heart and to love our neighbor as ourselves, right? All of them work together in that way. And all the church's teaching can be seen as connected to that. So think of, for instance, the 10 Commandments, right? The first 3 are all about level 4 happiness, right? We should honor the Lord God above all gods, right? If we don't do that, what happens? Well, we suffer, right? If I make gold and money into my God, I'm going to suffer. If I make power into my God, I'm going to suffer, and probably other people will suffer too. If I make fame and power into my God, I'm going to suffer, right? All those level 2 things are good, but we can have a disordered love for them if they become too important for us, right? And the same thing's true with level 1. Level 1 can become disordered if I love it excessively. If I love alcohol so much that I'm unwilling, say, to be sober when I'm driving, right? And I risk everyone's life on the road. Well, that's a disordered love of pleasure, right? Gluttony, you might call it, where I want, say, to drink so much that it gets in the way of, being a safe driver. So the church's no to greed or to gluttony or to those things is a yes to the good of loving your neighbor as yourself and loving God above all things. So the church, I would say, is actually the biggest advocate of happiness in the world, in part because the church does more than any other institution to care for people that really are in need of material sustenance, right? More than any government in the world, more than the United Nations, the church serves those people that are hungry, that are thirsty, that need an education, that need clothing. The church does more than any other institution to forward the material happiness, you might say, of people. But even more importantly than that, the church promotes, you might say, the level 3 and level 4 happiness of people. How? Well, for instance, through promoting gratitude. The psychological research on this is very strong, that gratitude is an absolute key to being truly happy. That people that are grateful are significantly more happy, more satisfied with life, less stressed out than people that don't practice gratitude. But gratitude is really the bread and butter of the Christian life. In the United States, of course, they celebrate the great feast, celebration of Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving Day is once a year in November. And basically, they did a study, and it showed that the fewest number of people commit suicide on Thanksgiving Day. In other words, if you look at the rate of suicide throughout the year, it goes to its very lowest point on Thanksgiving. And I think the reason's probably pretty clear, right? On Thanksgiving, people aren't saying, oh, I don't have this and I don't have that. Rather, most people, or more people than normal, are focusing on the good things that are in their life, right? That they have friends, that they have food, they have, the basic necessities, hopefully, and they're focusing on all being grateful for those things. Now, we as Catholics are very lucky because for us, Thanksgiving Day does not come just once a year. In fact, we have Thanksgiving every time we celebrate the Eucharist. The Eucharist is just the Greek term for Thanksgiving. And so every Mass is a chance to offer thanks, right? It doesn't come just once a year for us, it comes every Sunday or even more often. And in every Mass, the very last words of the Mass are what? Thanks be to God. It's the very last thing the Church wants us to have in our minds as we leave the church building. So the bottom line is this. Is the Church opposed to happiness? Absolutely not. The Church does more than any other institution to promote happiness, both material happiness of getting out of poverty, and also, you might say, spiritual happiness, the level 3 and level 4 happiness that we can have through loving God and loving our neighbor. Thank you very much.